In a world of microtransactions, never-ending item creation, and drab 3D melee combat, there's one group working tirelessly to preserve the raw gaming experience that people in my generation grew up with. Joymasher. Joymasher is a Brazilian game developer whose dedication to delivering authentic retro gaming experiences in the modern world is unparalleled. While comprised of many talented artists, the brains behind the operation is Danilo Dias, whose influence from 8-bit classics like Ninja Gaiden is hard to miss. As of the time of this video, Joymasher has blessed us with 3 retro-style games: Oniken, Odallus, and Blazing Chrome, with a 4th on the way. Thankfully, Joymasher's games have been getting the attention they deserve from the retro gaming community. I'm not unearthing some hidden treasure by covering them, and people in the market for this style of game probably already know about them. But so what? They kick ass! So in this video, I'm going to be looking at all 3 of Joymasher's games, starting with Oniken. Possibly intended to mean demon sword in Japanese, Oniken was Joymasher's debut title. It was originally released for PC in 2012 and depicts a small resistance fighting against an evil army of robots in a post-apocalyptic setting. Fist of the North Star will probably spring to mind, but there's nothing wrong with taking influence from the best. The game itself is a traditional 6-stage platformer which, at first glance, appears to be very similar to Ninja Gaiden, but actually plays a lot more like Vice Project Doom, at least in the control department. You swing a sword and also have a limited number of high-powered grenades which you'll definitely want to save for tricky spots. There are occasional sword power-up items which can be sacrificed for a few seconds of invincibility, and since you lose them after taking even 1 hit of damage, I've found using them up is the wiser strategy. The art style and music are both amazingly faithful to the capabilities of the NES, which is probably one of the reasons why the game caught on. The choice of colors in particular will immediately bring to mind so many of the games that shaped our gaming experiences in the 80s and 90s, and the creative but slightly clumsy bosses fit perfectly. The music is not only accurate to 8-bit limitations, but there's something lo-fi and even unstable about it that rounds out the experience perfectly. I don't know whether it was done purposely or not, but it's these little imperfections that make Oniken feel like playing some obscure game you rented for the weekend from the video store, with nothing else to go on but the artwork on the box. As for the actual gameplay, it's hard as hell, and this is primarily because Oniken is effectively a game of memorization. Most of the enemy bullets are much too fast to be avoided on your first play. You'll need to memorize where most enemies spawn and how they behave before you can kill them without taking damage. People who have followed me for a while probably know, generally, that's not the kind of game design I'm drawn to. But thanks to the brisk, reliable control, awesome artwork and music, and intricate boss patterns, I naturally had a great time playing Oniken and never thought of it as a defect. There are also a number of gameplay tricks like a jet bike stage, an auto-scrolling section, and grabbing onto tree limbs. Again, all well within the range of what an NES game could do. As I've said in previous videos, you can plan what kind of game you want to make, but you can't necessarily force it to turn out a certain way, which is the real beauty of the art form. Oniken comes together as an authentic, reflex-based gaming experience that just gets it. There's an angst to it, as if the developer were actually fighting to get the most they could out of very limited hardware specifications. For that alone, it's a modern classic. Joymasher's second game was Odallus, another ode to the 8-bit era, but this time around it's an action-adventure game. The game world is split up into areas that you enter from a world map, but there's ability gating, so you'll need to revisit the same area several times in many cases. Odalus' story is even more abstract than Oniken's, if that's possible. Darkness has taken over the land, and you take control of a wandering knight named Haggis, who's on a quest to find his lost son. This is actually defining of the game world in Odalus, as it doesn't need a lot of words to convey what's happening. Instead, the artwork and music depict a dark, destitute world that make the player feel like they're one of the last remaining humans in a land overrun by evil. This kind of ambiguous approach to game design is exactly why I prefer older games to newer ones, and once again, Joymasher gets it. The movement of your character in Odalus feels a bit heavier than Oniken, which is in line with the character design and worldview. The control manages to convey that you're wearing a suit of armor, while still being brisk enough for a traditional 2D action game. It takes a bit of time to learn exactly how long one cycle of animation for the sword slice is, but once you get it, it's oh so satisfying to chop down those servants of the dark side. Since Odallus is an action-adventure game, the main feature is finding the items and abilities needed to access restricted areas. Many of the abilities you would expect to find are here: pushing blocks, double jumping, and breathing underwater. There are also a couple that aren't as obvious, like a spear that allows you to break open entryways on the ground. There seem to be a trillion Metroidvanias now that all use this game mechanic, but like any other genre, it takes a talented developer to do it in a way that's fun and engaging. Thankfully, Odalus is one of those games that gets it right, and the biggest reason is because it doesn't only rely on exploration. The platforming provides just as much challenge as the ability gating does. This was standard for 8-bit games in the genre, so it really shows just how well the developers at Joymasher grasped the spirit of retro games. The only time Odallus does deride into a search fest is if you want to see the true ending, as you'll need to find every single item in the game, including ones that aren't needed to complete it normally, like sub-weapon increase items. By the time you're powered up so far, this will just be busy work, but thankfully the somber atmosphere, and especially the music, kept me motivated. Odallus is yet more proof that Joymasher's tagline, "We know retro," wasn't an afterthought. In 2019, Joymasher released their third game, the illustriously titled Blazing Chrome. With the indie gaming market booming like it is now, there are countless games touting themselves as pixel art or a throwback, but to accurately recreate the kind of artwork we associate with games in the 16-bit era is a huge task. And once again, Joymasher has stepped up to the challenge with astounding results. Blazing Chrome is a run and gun this time, and its primary source of influence should be so obvious that really there's no need for me to say it. But I will anyways. It could basically be called Contra Hard Corps 2, and I'm sure you all realize that's not a bad thing. There are 2 selectable characters initially, but they have the exact same abilities and are effectively palette swaps. You'll need to beat the game once to access the second character type. Just like Contra Hard Corps, you can pick up different weapons in-game and then cycle through them at will, and dying will lose the weapon you were equipped with at that moment. In addition to standard weapons, there are also several special abilities which are represented as little robot helpers that follow you around. There's one that gives you a bit of extra firepower, one that increases your walking speed and jump distance, and a very valuable shield which will protect you from 2 hits. Once again, this game takes place in a post-apocalyptic future overrun with robots hell-bent on killing off any remaining humans, and the backgrounds and enemy sprites convey this perfectly. From the moment you're dropped into the game, cyborgs chase after you relentlessly, and it becomes perfectly clear this game is for hardcore 2D gamers only. Most enemies take 2 hits to kill, so it isn't quite the high-speed mayhem fest that is Contra Hard Corps. You'll need a bit more patience and precision. But what it does share with the game that inspired it is the constantly changing terrain, which lends itself to many different playstyles and tons of awesome bosses. Like Oniken, Blazing Chrome also sports a couple jet bike stages, the second of which is quite an ordeal, but there are some other cool tricks this time around, like mechs you can ride in a couple stages, and this freaking legendary Space Harrier style section. The variety in stage design is absolutely top class and can stand alongside some of the greatest games on the Sega Genesis. Just as impressive is the artwork. Blazing Chrome recreates the color schemes and character designs of the early 90s so accurately that I can't say it imitates them. It brings them back to life. To put this much detail into every one of the bosses, every single background, it's just too good to be true. Don't get me wrong, I love the artwork in Joymasher's previous games, and I'm sure they took a lot of work. But Blazing Chrome must have taken at least twice as much manpower, and it's amazing to see an already great developer evolve even further. But there's one thing I love about Blazing Chrome even more than the graphics. The soundtrack. It is so damn legendary! It sounds like they put the sound hardware from one of Konami's early arcade games into the program, and the compositions are everything you would expect from games of that era. I'm not going to ramble on about the music, just go listen to the song in the Space Harrier section. Trust me. Basically, Blazing Chrome shows an unparalleled passion for the art form. Joymasher managed to completely trump their previous efforts and deliver one of the most accurate throwback gaming experiences in the modern era. As far as I'm concerned, it grants them living legend status. Lastly, Joymasher is currently developing their fourth game titled Moonrider, which you may remember from my video about upcoming games for 2020. Moonrider also goes for the 16-bit graphical style, but appears to play like a cross between Shinobi 3 and Mad Stalker. Everything I've seen so far shows it to be another masterpiece in the works. So for now, we'll have to settle for occasional teaser images and videos. So, that was my video about what's probably my favorite currently active developer. If by some chance you like retro games enough to watch my videos but haven't played any of Joymasher's games yet, do yourself a favor and give them a try. They're a godsend for people in our hobby. That's all, thanks for watching to the end, and I hope to see you in the next episode.